Recording in progress.
Okay. I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember McCardle.
Here.
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Attending remotely via teleconference.
Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Here.
And Councilmember Ryan asked to be excused.
Move to excuse.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? He is excused. All right, so next on our agenda is the presentation from the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County Annual Report, and we have two people, well, both of you, are the CEO, Gary Clark, and Wendy Poischberg.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's very, very awesome to be invited to speak to you all this evening. We just have a very brief overview of our annual report and then just a highlight of the potential partnership with the City of Mountlake Terrace. So, first and foremost, I want to announce that I have my VP of Economic Development with me, Wendy Poischberg, and she is actually a born and raised here in Mountlake Terrace. So yeah. I'm going to attempt to move this slide for you all. Make sure I can do that. All right, great. So obviously, just a quick overview of who we are. Economic Alliance Snohomish County is the countywide economic development organization called the ADO, but also the countywide Chamber of Commerce. And so we've been operating in this space since 2011 with the merger of several different organizations. But our vision has always been Snohomish County is globally connected, uniquely and locally focused to be recognized as a place to be. Beyond that space, though, our mission, and this is why our staff, as in Wendy and others, have been looking to make sure that we're strengthening our partnerships, is because our job is to make sure that we are really the catalyst for growth and change in Snohomish County. This has brought us to many different public-private partnerships, and these partnerships are tied to us trying to make sure that our regional ecosystem grows and sustains itself. How can we uplift not only the economic development operations from the municipal perspective, but also our local chambers of commerce? And so this shows that in our last year, we have had a focus on 6 pillars, and that has continued to be our mantra going forward. And those 6 pillars are advocacy, business attraction, business retention and expansion, quality of life, small business and chamber, and last but not least, workforce. Each of these pillars help us to maintain a thriving effort to sustain work in economic development spaces, creating jobs, and creating opportunities for small businesses in Snohomish County. Now, here's a quick slide visual of our current standing as an organization. As you can see, Wendy Poischberg is the VP of Economic Development, but we haven't shown you what is hidden there is the chamber partnership elements that will be brought out under our economic development arm. But we have several other partner organizations in SBDC, and also we have a federal grant with SBTRC, Department of Transportation, and then we also have what's called Snohomish STEM and Career Connect Washington, and that's tied under EASC. So those operations work right under EASC or in partnership. To get to just a few more slides, business attraction, which is kind of a focal point for Wendy Poischberg and our Department of Economic Development work. It has been a tremendous year, even through the remnants of COVID. We've had a capital investment through landed projects of $945 million. And you can see some of the projects that were landed throughout the county. We also have several pending projects that if you needed to ask some questions, Wendy could easily give you some insight on that. But it has been a very busy year, and we can say that we have supported the creation of 1,300 jobs within this year. Due to these projects and other pending projects, I believe that number will increase. Beyond that, though, just attraction specific, we've had 95 projects in the pipeline for the county, but we've also had and coordinated 259 projects in various states of development. Beyond that, though, our hub and our core going forward will be business retention expansion efforts. And that means that we'll continue to maximize our efforts to make sure that the existing businesses in Snohomish County, Mountlake, Terrace, and other spaces have opportunity to expand, grow, and sustain themselves. And that's by making sure that our staff is meeting with them on a regular basis. Wanted to quickly show you some of the overall numbers if we're thinking of the work that Economic Alliance has done over the years. This is just a total number. On average, we're at about 50 projects that are maintained, but we've gone beyond that number this year. And then another quick update is the top industries that we see bubbling up. And so this is just a focus to make sure that advanced manufacturing is bubbling up at the top. Aerospace has always been a mainstay, life sciences, and clean tech, which is growing quickly in this realm. We also have had some unique agricultural and food processing projects that have rolled up. I just quickly wanted to highlight a couple of landed projects. Zeravia, Magniax is another. As you can see, there's just a busy, eclectic nature in energy and development in the aerospace field. Really quickly, just to highlight the ongoing BRE efforts. So we've gone through this process to develop in partnership with an organization or a partner under our organization, which I did not mention, which is PTAC. It's the Procurement Technical Assistance Counselors. They're also a staff under us through grant, and they provide support to businesses looking to do government contracts. So that is another organization that has lended itself to our BRE numbers, as you can see, 669. So there is a robust group of staffers making sure that we're engaged with our local businesses. Quickly, I want to highlight that Mayor and Councilmember Woodard showed up to our most recent Snow Code event. It was our first annual Snow Code event, which is tied to connecting businesses to diversity, equity, inclusion. They attended the forum on diversity, equity, inclusion, and we really appreciated your attendance there, Mayor and Council Member. It was really awesome to have you in support of that work, and it took place in Edmonds College just a few weeks ago. Last but not least, and why we're really excited about Mountlake Terrace, and Wendy and I are really pleased to bring to you something that we and Stefan have communicated over, which is called the Chamber Partnership. And we really believe that our job is to strengthen the chambers that exist, not to take away from them. And so in our space here, we'd like to help in partnering to develop and expand the work for Mountlake Terrace and its local chamber. That work would mean that EASC would come in and support developing, staffing, and making sure that all the services and efforts that we have internal in-kind services that EASC has can impart that on the local chamber to make sure that we can stand up events, stand up communication on legislative items for small businesses, and have that one single voice. So with that in mind, as they say in the church before, it's time to eat, brother, be brief. So I have here just a quick snapshot of what we have for services. The goal is to develop a dedicated staffer, business consulting, BRE efforts, as we mentioned, special events, and also a host of other efforts. But one singular piece to this, as I close, is making sure that we're merging the promotion of Mountlake Terrace and its businesses. So we're really excited to support that. And I want to close with that because I believe I've reached the end of my slides.
Does anyone have any questions? Councilmember Sonmore?
Thank you. My first question always is, and it has been for years, is what you can do for the city of Mountlake Terrace. And so thank you for bringing the snapshot in, because usually we don't get something concrete like that. So with that being said, as much as I appreciate this as well, and I think it will help our downtown, what can you help us with our downtown? For years, it's always been that you guys were going to help us with getting medical to come in. We thought we could promote ourselves as a medical district in certain areas of Mountlake Terrace, since we're so close to the hospitals and some other areas. But I was wondering if you're looking at certain things or working with our staff to bring businesses in, especially since we're building our downtown second phase with our $5 million that we just received. But the land is there. There's places that businesses can go and are zoned. And so I was just kind of wondering.
Absolutely. I think in tandem with what we're showing you here as far as a snapshot and the chamber partnership piece, a lot of this is tied to an overall plan of action to engage businesses, to plan out where they fit, just tied to your comprehensive plan and zoning efforts. But we can maximize that by making sure that we're having dedicated staff to engage with your city staff to make sure that the actual industries that you want to see land here, that we continue to churn that out. And when we find that the data doesn't show that, we can shift gears. But our goal is to make sure that we're providing you with substantial, significant data that help you to paint the picture the way that you need it, but also giving your staff some support to get it done. Another piece to that is marketability, being prepared for projects as they come out, and that's where Wendy comes in. The RFPs that come out, we want to support your staff in making sure that we know that if there's a potential project to be landed here, that we're ready to go right away.
And that will segue into talking to Wendy, so thank you for saying that, especially when she's a hometown girl and another former Hawk here. So that being said, can you help us with marketing then as well with our staff?
Yes, we can. I want to just touch on one thing is looking at your, thank you, looking at your active and your active business licenses, we can filter through your NAICS codes and see what you have and then what the gap is and what the fit is, and then also see what Gary mentioned, what real estate is available, so then we can put the right mix in, because just because you want something doesn't mean, like, everyone wants an Aldi and a Trader Joe's and a bowling alley, and then that doesn't
Grocery
always come. Right, and so then working on you guys need some additional retail, right? So we can look and see what a good fit is with national consumer groups to see if we can bring those in. So also marketing, we have a great brand marketing manager, and we can see what your fit is and what speaks to that community that we'll be working with.
Great. And I just want to close with, and thank you both for your comments, is I heard you say aerospace is a mainstay, and it always kind of, I don't know how to say it, but to me, it's not a mainstay, and I'm always very careful with that, just because, we no longer have the 4.7 as of a couple weeks ago, but it's something that we've always taken it for granted as a mainstay, and looking at how it's gone over the last 20 years, it used to be we grew our own people, and our people in the area would get jobs there. And now it's changed a lot. Now, our engineers would come from all over the place, but a lot of the factory workers would be local, and their parents work there, and their parents work there, and their grandparents work there. And it's no longer a business like that. And we've really changed to something very global. And it's always really important for me to put the message out there. We can't always bank on Boeing. We always have to be appreciative that aerospace is still in our area, and hopefully it will stay in our area. And all the workers there, I would appreciate that, if we just say that, to have aerospace in our industry is not the main thing, but it's one of the things that helps Snohomish County. I just always want to share that message, because sometimes when you're working there, you don't know if you're going to have a job, especially when the economy goes bad or 9/11 comes in. But it's one of those things that we're proud to have it in our community, but it's always something, it could lead. And And talking to your organization many years ago, we were talking about aerospace, and now we're talking about different businesses that are coming into our area, which is exciting as well.
I think you'll see that we have a focus on advanced manufacturing, but aerospace of tomorrow will look wholly different with hydrogen. We're working with, we're the fusion capital here in Snohomish County, and your residents are our workforce. And so our STEM team is doing an incredible job merging into the K through 20, actually, education system in order to prepare them for that next, like getting them interested in, like, do you know the difference between fission and fusion? I didn't. I went to a conference yesterday, so I can talk cocktail party talk and actually sound like I know what's going on. Gary knows more. But I will say that your point is well taken. We have to diversify in order to survive.
Yeah, but also if we can train people in our area to have jobs up there, because right now, well, I want to say they're looking for a lot of people, but a lot of those gaps are being filled as we're saying it. You know, a few months ago, we couldn't get enough people to come in, and now I think they're coming in with other places maybe laying off and the threat of being laid off. But yeah, it's fascinating to be able to take some of our citizens that may not want to go to college and may not want to do the mainstay of work, but they have these organizations or manufacturing opportunities, and we can educate people within here and, you know, help people that, you know, I'm always go to the homeless, you know, but there's people that if they only knew they had a chance to work in a major corporation or a manufacturing within their own county, it gives them hope. So, you know, I've liked what you've done over the years, so keep it up.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Councilmember Ricardo?
Thank you, Mayor. Just thank you for tonight, for coming out and giving the presentation, and we appreciate all the work you do for, you know, Snohomish County in general, and I'm really looking forward to the partnership that we'll develop with the new chamber and see where that goes and how it can help bring kind of some new nuances to Mountlake Terrace. The question I have is, have you seen or studied or looked at any kind of trends of businesses that want to locate around a light rail station and what that might mean for Mountlake Terrace as we market ourselves or we look at our codes and things like that, the kind of businesses we would be able to attract?
Yeah, that's a great question, Council Member. I think we're in the midst of doing that work right now. I think there are a couple of preliminary studies if we look at Puget Sound and other places that have tried to develop kind of the growth plan analysis. But I think a more specific study to Snohomish County is what Wendy and I have been talking about, trying to analyze different pockets. But that's a specific one that is going to be a tremendous benefit. It's going to draw commercial core retail. It's going to draw other office space businesses that you'd like to have. And it's going to be a robust hub. And so I think you asked the prime question is, how do we paint the picture to make sure that we know what's coming forward? Wendy, did you want to add to that?
No, I was just thinking of, Stefan and I were having this conversation that we saw grocery stores, you know, you've got these amazing new living spaces that are multi-story, and we were sharing that we were seeing in New York where they were putting grocery stores in the middle of apartment buildings because that's where their tenants, you know, they didn't it was something very local, and I'm like, I've never seen a convenience store or a full-blown grocery store in the fourth floor of an apartment building. Mm-hmm. How cool would that be? Yeah. Anyway.
Well, thank you.
Something to think about, for sure.
It'll just be curious to see, you know, because right now in Snohomish County, we have 2 stations that aren't open yet, Mountlake Terrace and Linwood. So when they do open, what, you know, and how we can begin to attract different businesses and services. So
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Anyone else? Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. Thank you for being here. Very, very excited, particularly about the partnership and kind of the upcoming work that's going to be done there. In looking at that EASC services snapshot, if we as council members wanted to understand some of those pieces better and or our community and businesses wanted to understand some of those pieces better, where would they go to find out more info? Yeah,
well, I would say you can contact Wendy from our team. She's going to also have an outline of what that plan looks like from a city perspective. And Wendy, you could probably speak a little bit more to that.
Right, so our main goal is to make sure that the businesses that you already have are healthy and whole before we attract new. And so we will be putting together a plan of which businesses and how we visit them. So being strategic, so, you know, it takes time, right? And it's not just that we knock on the door. We have to make sure that when we visit, because we're asking very specific questions, we want to understand barriers, that, you know, we're not showing up to a restaurant at lunchtime, right? And so being very strategic, and then also the business consulting piece, like how do we pair the technical assistance that we already provide at EAC and make sure that our counselors are available for them? So when they express a desire for, I need help with bookkeeping or financial literacy, that we can actually meet them where they are. And so we'll be putting that together for you.
Okay, it's very exciting. And I guess just a quick note on that grocery store, because I know that is a keen topic here in Mountlake Terrace often, is how do we get a grocery store back in our core? I love the comment about a grocery store in a building. They put a PCC in the building that I work in downtown Seattle, and it is wildly busy all of the time. And I know that they've had a lot of success with that. And so if that would help us, I guess one of the things that I'd be curious if you do is if, like, there are things that we need to think about from a code and, you know, I guess our perspective to enable some of those things, it would be great. I think we would welcome understanding if there are barriers to businesses coming into our community that we would like to attract to our community. So I guess, is that something that you help support us with, as well as understanding that
I think we
piece?
can support you with that. Under this contract and the limited amount of hours that we're able to support you, I think that I see us being able to come to the city and say, here's a recommendation, and this is what, you know, you will need to do in order to attract that business.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
trust city staff but yeah, sometimes I think you don't know what you don't know, right? So
For
since
sure.
you're on the ground working with those businesses, I think if we're hearing that there are businesses that we're trying to attract who would be interested and there's a barrier, it would be really great to understand what those are.
Yeah.
And I know that it was Gary's goal that he was like, we want to be extremely collaborative with the city and report back. In fact, I know he's mentioned that to us many times, like we're not going to keep the information. We're here to provide that for you.
Yeah, yeah. I think our goal with the BRE piece is to make sure that the information is funneled through, that we're collaborative, and I think Wendy developing what is called the chamber partnership piece, which is already collaborative in communication, but now having some serious teeth, legs, and arms to it will make us have a more robust plan that we can share collectively.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. I appreciate it.
Do you want to go? Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. I echo everything I just heard here, and thank you for making the trip down and all that. I just want to make sure that I went on record to say, because I bring you up almost at every council member or a council meeting, which is the leadership. Thank you so much, and your leadership team, thank you for that work. But in particular, around the coffee chats, you have the region talking to each other. Every time you have this, it's amazing who shows up. That you record them, keeps the accessibility there, and they lead to further conversations. I've heard that from other colleagues, but just want to make sure I express that into the record, how proud I am to know that we're going to partner with a group that's already doing great work, and you're not even really giving us everything that you do in this presentation. So I just wanted to acknowledge those are all interconnected, and just excited to know that our residents will learn a lot more about you through this partnership, and maybe they'll start participating even heavier in the coffee chats.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Woodard. We really appreciate the opportunity to provide that service. I will say that my staff is kind of taking the onus, but if any council member or mayor, if you have any interest, and you have done this before, the mayor has actually given us some insight on some ideas for coffee chats, and that's worked wonders for us. So if any of you ever have any ideas that you feel like we're lacking in to bring to coffee chat topics, we'd love to hear. So.
I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Wall if he has anything, because usually he has on economic development. So I didn't want to miss him. So Mayor Pro Tem, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the great presentation and for as echoing what others have said as well. I am very excited about the partnership that we're having with the Economic Alliance. I've been served on the policy board for a number of years back. I know what great work you do and have done for the community for a long time, and but really excited about particularly the partnership we're going to be going down with the new chamber, and excited about the contract we just passed with our new budget, and looking forward to working with you on making a lot of great things happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to highlight really quick before we depart, you have a sheet that Stefan has provided, which is our legislative kickoff on January 5th. It's from 10 a.m. to noon at Hotel Indigo in Everett, and just a great opportunity to collaborate, elected officials, and there will be a panel, kind of a coffee conversation there as well. And last but not least, I believe every year we do a DC trip, fly-in trip, and we'd love to have Mountlake Terrace represented on that DC fly-in trip. I believe this year it's tentatively posed to happen in May. So just something to keep in mind, and we'll get some more information out to you.
Okay. I just wanted to just quickly thank you for not having the legislative kickoff early in the morning, like it has been in the past. One of the challenges for Mountlake Terrace with looking at who to look for is that anyone who comes in has to assemble up to 18 lots. And so, so probably, we have a lot of things to talk about but that's the challenge with our downtown, is we have the land. It's just that you have to work with up to 18 different people and personalities. And I have a lead on a grocery store, so I'll talk to you about that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Okay, so next on our agenda is City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just a few, actually 3 brief items. Just wanted to call your attention to the staff of the city being in response to a number of citizen concerns about the storm debris drop-off and how to handle that, in addition to whatever waste management is offering. That we did announce just a couple days ago that there will be a special event, free storm debris drop-off, which is set for this weekend for Mountlake Terrace residents only, both Saturday and Sunday from 8 to 4. And again, this is green waste only, residential customers only, but a fairly straightforward way of providing a service to our citizens after this difficult storm. So I want to make sure you're aware that that's happening day after tomorrow. Second of the 3 items I want to bring forward is in regard to the Regional Fire Authority, the RFA process moving forward with our relationship with South County Fire, and the need to make some decisions about our status in relation to the potential of annexation into the fire district moving forward, as other cities are also poised to do that. The 3-member committee, as you're aware, with Laura Sonmore, Councilmember Woodard, and also Councilmember McCardle, because there's a need to, in short order, move this matter forward, and because Councilmember McCardle's last day is this coming Monday on the council, we've asked him if he would graciously be willing to continue on this committee for the next few months, because we need to get this through council approval and presumably on a ballot measure and so forth. And he has agreed to do that. So I'm hoping to have council concurrence this evening to accept Councilmember McCardle's willingness to serve beyond his council tenure on that committee for the next few months. And so I'm kind of looking for concurrence. I don't know if we
Vote
need
on that, or
a
do we just,
formal motion, or is that?
oh, do we have to put a motion through? Is there a consensus that we graciously accept Councilmember McCardle's offer? Yes,
Absolutely.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Mayor, Council, I just want to point out, the RFA is extremely important to the city of Mountlake Terrace, and Councilman McCardle holds a wealth of knowledge in that, and we don't want to lose that opportunity. So I'd just like to commend Councilman McCardle for wanting to take that opportunity to stay on that committee. That's absolutely fantastic.
Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. I was waiting to ask this here, and I will just put it out there. Again, thank you for graciously offering to stay on. I hope that comes with a stipend for him, because this is going to be a lot of work, and I don't think this is something that he should be doing volunteer-wise. That's just my opinion. So if that's part of this process or a different set of conversations, I at least want to introduce the concept that we should also make sure that he is compensated for his time.
I appreciate that comment. We were planning to bring in Subway sandwiches to the meetings, but I think you're talking about something perhaps more than that. But that's a conversation we can certainly pursue. But I mean, at this point, I very much appreciate the council's gracious acceptance of Councilmember McCardle's gracious offer to do that. And I believe you all understand the fast track that this issue is on. And we did meet, the three members of the committee met just an hour ago, actually. And so the staff is in a position to bring back a preliminary presentation to the council at its first meeting in January, which is January 3rd, in order, because of the holiday, it's on a Tuesday. In order to actually get this as a priority item for the council to be deliberating throughout the month of January, so that some decisions could hopefully be made in February. So we are, without going into the details this evening, there's a need to do this, and I view this as an urgent matter in terms of making proper decisions and having public input into that, and so we'd like to get that going. So I appreciate Councilmember Woodard's suggestion that we find out what Mr. McCardle needs in order to keep this going, but hopefully the three members of the committee will assist us in moving this forward. And so more to come on January 3rd, which is not too far away. And the rumor has it there are actually 2 holidays between now and January 3rd, so we are kind of factoring those in as best we can. Thank you for that. And the last of the 4 items I wanted to bring up is also on a time schedule, and that's the city manager recruitment process. We have talked before about the schedule, the need to start the advertising right after the holiday in earnest in order to get candidates in here to meet our time frame of deliberating in February for a final interview in March. I did circulate the final draft of the profile document to you a couple days ago. It's gone through several levels of staff review. It's a 5 or 6 page document that I think does a good job of capturing important information about Mountlake Terrace and about what the Mountlake Terrace City Council is looking for in its next city manager. And so if you have comments on that, if you could let me know in the next day or two, that would be very helpful because we'd like to finalize that document. There are 2 elements of the document or of the process that haven't been ironed out yet. One is the salary range, and the other is the residency issue. So I'd like to throw them out right now for you to either give me some advice on, or if not tonight, then perhaps in the next couple of days, but we do need to finalize that. And I'm going to start with salary. I did send you a survey. I actually have hard copies of it with me if you'd like to see it. Okay, I'm just asked Mr. Woodard if he could pass it down. I think there are, actually there are 7 copies there, so there's 5 of you, but if that's helpful, please please take it. But the salary measure is not just a matter of comparing us with other cities, even though that's a factor. It also certainly has to do with recruiting in a market where in the past there might have been, 25 or 30 candidates, and in the last year or so, that just hasn't played out with any of the cities in the Puget Sound. In other words, the number of applicants is a lot smaller, probably for a number of different reasons. But also, in Mountlake Terrace, the salary that you were paying the former city manager is actually being compressed upon with salaries of senior department directors, because the budget has grown and cost of living has kept up with them where it hasn't. So basically, I'll put it tactfully as I can, but you were paying a city manager, in effect, the same or perhaps even less than some of your other senior staff members and department directors. And so, to be more precise, the salary of the last city manager was $165 annually. That's just straight salary. That doesn't include other kinds of benefits that go with these positions. But in talking to the recruitment team and in reviewing the survey that you have a copy of now, and in reviewing the compression issue, I'm recommending, and the recruiting team is pushing for numbers to be as high as they can be, but the recommendation is a range that goes from 175 to 205. And we recognize that means the bottom of the range is actually higher than what you were paying before, but for the reasons I mentioned, I believe that's fully justified. And the purpose of a range is to attract people to apply. It doesn't mean that you have to start at the middle or the top of the range. If quite the contrary, you could actually be starting, depending on the candidate and depending on the negotiation process, you could be starting at the very beginning of the range. But it is nonetheless a range, and the numbers, again, I'll mention, are 175 to 205, which is a $30,000 range, which is not that broad, and it has played out in a number of searches that I've been involved with in the Puget Sound in the last few months. So, and it is, I think it gives you as a council some flexibility. It gives you a better chance at attracting the kind of candidates that I think you want. And it also keeps your organization in alignment, because to do anything, in my opinion, less than this, I think would cause a difficult time with your senior executive team working with the council. So that's my recommendation. So I'll kind of let me ask quickly if there's any reaction to that at this point. If you want some more time to think about it, I don't need an answer this evening, but I do in the next few days. So I'd be open to hearing feedback about this. And then there is the residency issue as well. Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, City Manager. Appreciate all of the work from everyone going on behind the scenes to get us ready for this recruitment, and hopefully ready for a really successful recruitment that we will have multiple quality candidates to choose from. And so I guess I'm curious about the proposed range. So looking at kind of a number of 175 and some of the numbers that we have before us, the only kind of seemingly most of the city managers who are in that area from a pay perspective are not in, let's call it the greater Seattle area. Those are, I mean, it looks like there's some folks in kind of Southwest Washington, east of the mountains, on the peninsula. And so I guess my question is that high enough to get us to a place where we are going to be able to solicit the person that we need in order to lead us as a community and lead us as an organization, given what we know is a large ask here in the near future. And so I guess I'm just looking at comparables from particularly communities near us, and I know that there are all sorts of factors that go in there. And I mean, I do think that it's an interesting, counterpoint that Kenmore's at 208, Bothel's at 214, Mill Creek's at 195. I guess I came in with kind of getting myself ready for the idea that midpoint would probably be around 200 and that we would probably have a range around that in order to, I mean, recognizing that where we ultimately land is up to us. And I guess I would rather us make that decision than create a range where people are opting out who might be the right fit for us as a community as we move forward. So I guess those are my initial thoughts, and, you know, but
Well,
I appreciate the opportunity to have
No,
the
I
conversation.
appreciate the comment, and believe me, I've had robust discussions with the recruitment team about, pushing this over 200, and so, my thought was, knowing where you've been with the salary that you paid as recently as 2 months ago, how we could move this forward. So I thought a range would do that, but the argument that the top of the range perhaps should be higher which is what I hear you saying, is yeah, I hear you with that, and so be curious about others
Councilmember Sondor?
as well.
Thank you. Some of the city managers on here that are making 200,000 have 80,000 residents in their cities. So we've been very careful what we've paid ours, and we've had that long conversation here. Some of them are just going up astronomically, and so I err on the caution of 175 to 205, because you're looking, and I thought our city manager was around 154. I know he had been given a raise, but not much. And so I was kind of even surprised it was at 165. So selling that to our residents to, bump up $45,000, and that city manager better deliver a lot. And so some of these city managers have been there a long time. And so when you're looking at recruitment, are you going to ask that person if they have city manager experience? Do they have their credentials? Are they Washington citizens? Do they know Washington state law? Because if they're outside of Washington, there's a lot of learning curve for them to know. What is their experience? What is their project management experience? I think there's a whole host of different ranges that go behind this, and I just don't want to bucket us into somebody who's brand new to city management and we're paying them the same thing as somebody who manages a city that has 80,000 people. So you kind of have to look at what you need to pay somebody and what their experience level is. So starting at $200,000, I guess, would just wouldn't sit well with me, and so that's my feedback for that.
And do I hear you saying that the range is acceptable?
Yeah.
You just don't want to start at the top of the range?
Yeah,
Okay.
to start the range at 175 to 205.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that. And just a comment, population, we added population to the chart, or maybe the chart
No,
that I
not
emailed
this
you,
one. Our
the
old
more recent
ones
one that
used to have-
I emailed it to you today, but the, population is only one factor. I mean, when you look at cities, some cities are full-service cities, which have their own utilities and police departments and so forth, as this city does. There are other cities that are largely contract cities, so you have, fewer employees and you're managing contracts, which is a different skill set. And of course, the demographics of cities in terms of how they're positioned for, I see Mountlake Terrace as, it's not the largest city in the region, of course, but it's poised in terms of its economic development to have potential to be doing a whole lot of things. And so you want someone who appreciates that. And then just in terms, even though we're not talking specifically about qualifications today, we're talking right now just about salary and in a moment about residency. The factors that you mentioned in terms of how many years of experience you want, and as you review the candidates, once you determine who the finalists are and who you want to interview, those are certainly the kinds of questions that you need to determine. Are you largely interested in Washington State people more so than out of state? Because we have, the new city manager in Shoreline came from Nevada, the new city manager in Burien just came from California. You do have you have a number of out-of-state people who are taking significant city manager jobs in this area, and I'm sure are going to do well. But there are some advantages to knowing Washington state laws and so forth. And then the question is, do you want a city manager who's actually had that title before, or are you open to having, you know, a assistant city manager or deputy city manager in a larger city come in and do that? And that's, you know, you can argue certainly the pros and cons for that. And the other issue, when I met with your DEI commission last night, there's also, you know, concern about making sure it's a diverse field of candidates that you're having a chance to meet. So the profile document was intended to bring all that out, but the final decision, of course, is entirely the council's decision as to who you want to interview and who you want to appoint.
And just to go off of that, there's a lot of growing room for a city manager, but there's a lot of things that are changing with city managers as police are involved in incidents and how they represent the police, and if they know how to represent the employees of the police department. We're seeing that in different areas of Washington State, and it's interesting how some city managers know how to react to that, or how to work with commissions and different things. So there's a lot riding on jobs for people who take on city manager roles. And I've had my share of 5 city managers and have met a lot of city managers along the way. And there is a whole host of learning levels and experience out there. And I'm hoping that we can find somebody that can represent our city well.
Thank you. Any other comments about the proposed range?
Anyone else? Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this. Thank you for the conversation. And I think for me, I wouldn't really know how to judge the salaries. I was just kind of going back and forth off population, off of what I know about some of these cities listed, what I think about our destination city. But at the same time, I'm realizing there's another box there of additional benefits that might help me know whether or not the salary range makes sense. Do we have a standardized, this is what we plan to offer in additional benefits, or is that going to be kind of worked out soon?
Yeah, that would be a recommendation that would be coming to you as we get closer to the actual time frame for selection, appointment, and negotiation. You know, there are some standard benefits, if you will, for city managers, including car allowances, deferred compensation, management leave, and so I can certainly tell you of the last several contract negotiations, what they look like around here. I wasn't planning to go through that this evening because I really want this. The purpose of deciding on the salary range is to make sure we get people in the door in terms of applying, and then we can also, there are non-salary issues that can play out well when you're negotiating, and so to be open to that, I think, is important.
And can I rebuttal? And Councilman Woodard, I wanted to rebuttal back to what you're saying because that's an excellent point. A lot of times what we do is we don't give car allowances, and if the city manager is there for a year, then we negotiate, instead of maybe upping the salary, we give a car allowance. So some of these items you can see are very diverse. You've got deferred comp, you've got car allowance. I mean, you've got one that's $6,600 for car allowance. That tells me, I wonder about what that city council is doing. And so some of it is all over the place, and you cash out of 5 vacation days. We used to have a city manager that most of our city managers wouldn't even take vacation days. And so maybe Olympia is trying to force their manager to take vacation days. But to me, these comps over here are negotiations ongoing, because you don't want to give everything all up front, because what happens if we pay our city manager $205,000? So a city of 22,000 people, and you give him, what, a 5% raise each year? I mean, that goes up really quickly. And so in order to look at the salaries and not move them up astronomically through here, we look at those other items such as car allowance and deferred comp and performance bonus. We don't usually do, so I'd wonder what Covington's doing, but we use those to offset the overall salary. So throwing them all in, I wouldn't put up at front. I know this is a lot different than normal negotiations, but this is an at-will employee, so things are done a little bit differently. So I'll just throw that out there.
And just to clarify, if I may, the range that I'm proposing is for 2023 to get this process going. You know, if you appoint someone who stays here for the next 12 years, then obviously, you know, the range would be adjusted over time as it would be with any other employee. But the goal would be, again, within the range that you presumably would be looking at the beginning of the range in terms of an actual negotiated salary once you decide on someone, unless, of course, you find a superstar who you're so interested in getting that you want to go to the top of the range, and that would be a decision for the council to make at that point. So my purpose was to give you enough flexibility that it would allow for that to happen and also get interested people to apply.
He's got 30 years.
Does anyone have anything else? Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any ideas to share?
Well, yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, we've talked about this, I guess, during our meetings with city manager and throughout the last month, and I'm comfortable with the range. I agree with, again, first of all, I agree with Councilmember Sonmore that there are a number of different factors that come into play in negotiating when we find the right person. But in order to find the right person, we need to attract the right person. And so I'm very comfortable with 175 to 205. I agree with Councilmember Murray that I'd be comfortable going a little bit higher than 205 if that's what it takes to attract the right talent to lead our city. So, you know, and then once we get the talent coming in the door and we have a chance to talk with them, and then we can negotiate from the range of, you know, 175 to whatever, depending on who they are. You know, it depends if they're from out of state, if they're an assistant city manager, or, you know, all those different factors will play a role in determining our final negotiation with bringing them on board. But I think the most important thing right now is to get attract the right talent for us to be able to have some great candidates to be able to make some good decisions from.
Okay, thank you. So you wanted a consensus tonight on salary range?
It would be helpful. I'm not hearing any, well, I'm hearing what seems to be an emerging consensus, although a bit of a question from a couple of you as to whether the top of the range is high enough. I'm hearing that from a couple of you. And of course, Mr. Ryan's not here this evening. So is there a consensus at this point for the range that's been recommended?
Well, for me, we'll know really fast if we're too low. We won't get anybody applying. But I'm comfortable with what we have. I thought we were going to go a little bit higher, but I'm comfortable with what we have because it looks like we're still going to attract good people. Because I look at some of these other cities that have the under 200,000 range on it, and some are very similar, but I'm fine with what your range is, because at least at the top of the range is over 200. Anyone else?
So if I can summarize what I've heard from many of you, I'm sensing there's a bit of concern about, you know, knowing full well that you don't, it's just a range you're publishing. You don't have to give it to anybody unless you want to once you get to negotiation. But I'm sensing from at least three of you that you're wondering if the top of the range is high enough. And I'm, the recruiter would be happy to have it be a bit higher. So if that, you know, we could push it to 210 if that would be, that's a slight change, but it might be symbolic enough to do that. So I'm just trying to get a read from your comfort level. And quite frankly, I wasn't sure whether with what you had paid the former city manager, I didn't know whether this would be a difficult conversation in terms of pushing it up beyond that. But I'm pleased that it's going faster than I thought it would.
Go ahead, Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you. I appreciate all of the thoughtful conversation, and I appreciate your approach, City Manager. And I think we know one of the reasons we're investing in a salary study this year is because I think we recognize that there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot of work that we haven't done in that area. And I guess I would hate to see us limit ourselves in a way that is impactful to ultimately identifying the right person for this role, because it is critical that we find the right person for this role. Ultimately, we don't have to make an offer at the top of our range at any point if that doesn't feel the right choice. All that opening up the range on the top end does is allow folks who maybe wouldn't apply for our role otherwise to raise their hand. And that might allow us to bring in a candidate that maybe we don't think we would have an opportunity for. But I would love to at least have those conversations and have folks be able to opt into our process, and then us decide, you know, that isn't the right fit for us at this time, versus somebody opt out of our process and we don't even ever get to have those conversations. And so I actually would love to see us go to 220, not because I want to pay 220 or think that's probably where we land, but I would love to see the candidates that come in with a range that is more consistent for our geographic area, recognizing that, I know we're going to talk about residency, but somebody's going to have to live somewhere near us. And I think the cost of living and also salaries have shifted dramatically over the last several years in particular. And I think we have to be realistic about that as we are moving forward with this role if we want to be competitive and attract the sorts of candidate that I think we need, at least in order to accomplish the things that we've set out when we look at our vision for our community. So again, I'm hopeful that is not necessarily where we land. And I think given some of these numbers, I don't think we necessarily will have to. But I think all opening the top end of the range does is it allows more folks to opt into our process, and it allows more conversations to be had with the recruiter and more conversations to be had with us before we get to a final decision. So.
Councilmember Salmore?
I guess I just want to throw it out there. If we offered somebody $220,000 in the next 5 years with the growth rate of inflation, they'd be making at least $230,000, $235,000. And I guess I would just wonder where that's going. I mean, the city of Kirkland is way overpaid, but the salaries are just getting astronomical, and I guess it just kind of floors me where we're going with some of the pay, or some cities are just offsetting the amount of salary with other things. Because, I mean, I'm looking at this, and you've got, you know, the severance package too is another thing. One city manager gets 4 weeks of sabbatical every 5 years. So I can see that one's probably custom made for that city manager there, because, you know, that's a little odd. And we've done that before, but yeah, I just kind of would be hesitant about 220.
Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. One last thing, and then I won't say more. I guess the other thing that I would say, so I think salaries should be flatter. I don't think this is a conversation about whether or not this, you know, that is the right number for city manager roles. I think where at least I approach this conversation, and I hope our community understands where I approach this conversation from, is the market is the market. And so, I mean, we can pretend that the market isn't the market, and we can say this is the range we're going to pay, and that is going to severely limit the candidates that we ultimately get to select from. I think, unfortunately, for better or worse, the market is reflected. We did a lot of work, and I appreciate all of the work that went into making sure that we understood what the market looked like. The market's reflects a significant shift from where we've been. And I think if we want to be competitive in the market and we want to attract candidates, we have to reflect where the market is, whether or not we think that is where the market should be. And so I guess I do want to make sure that from my perspective, like, I think we could have a great conversation about the philosophy of leadership pay versus, you know, and I think we also have to be realistic. If we are going to attract the right person for this role, we're going to have to be somewhere in the ballpark of where other communities are paying, whether or not we agree with that compensation. So,
and then I just rebuttal, what have we been doing the last 4 years? So, you know, it's a scary thought. So, point well taken.
And again, as someone who's very new here, I wanted to be very respectful of where you've been over the last X number of years, but I wanted to advise in terms of getting ready for the future. So this has been a good conversation for me to hear. And of course, tonight you're not deciding on a salary. You're simply deciding on what the advertisement will look like. And then, and hopefully you'll get candidates and then you can negotiate. And when the candidates do apply, as part of the application packet, they do indicate their expected or, you know, they give you an indication of what they want. And so you, on the basis of that, could also decide, you know, who you're planning to do the final interview with as well. So you will have flexibility until you sign a contract at whatever point you do that. So I'm kind of sensing that there's been a bit of a question about the range stopping at 205, and so I'm thinking this is kind of arbitrary on my part, but what if we just said 175 to 210 as kind of a compromise between what some of you have said, and go with that, and again see how it plays out, and we can make changes later. So I'm any violent objection to that? Okay, then if I can move on, and again, Mr. Ryan's not here, but I'll try to catch him up later. And then the final issue is residency. My understanding is that you have a track record here of experience of requiring or having city managers who were residents of Mountlake Terrace. The legislature did this past June approve a new state law which actually removes the requirement for city managers to reside in the code city after their appointment unless such residency is required by the council. So there's no state law that says city managers have to live in your city, but you as a council can decide if that is a requirement. My recommendation to you is that you don't require Mountlake Terrace residency. However, if your preference, which I sense it is that you have a city manager reside, that you prefer that he or she would reside in the community or be in close proximity, that at least indicates that you're not looking for someone who lives, you know, 50 miles away and is going to have to deal with being not close. It expresses a preference. We've had debates around the recruiting table as to, you know, should we put a mileage limit that they have to be within 15 miles, or we could be a certain, in terms of time frame of driving. Of course, the driving these days, you could, you know, you take you an hour to drive 10 miles, so that's probably not a good way to base it on hours. But the big question I have for you is, how important is city residency? Apparently it was to this city in the past, and is it still? Well, how do you view language that might say something like, the council does not require Mountlake Terrace residency, however, the city council prefers residency in the community in fairly close proximity? These are my words, but it's my attempt to try to come up with something that could be advertised. Comments?
Thank you, Councilman. And our city manager, White, who had been here 20, 30 years, lived in the city. So the first time we've had somebody outside of the city that wasn't a temporary city manager was our last city manager, who lived 3 houses outside of the city. So that's our background. And so this is something that would need some discussion. I'm okay, I'll just go first on it. I'm okay with them living outside of the city. I guess if we're talking about money and different things, I guess that would be a benefit to that person. And that would be something that may attract other people if they're closer by and they don't want to move. But we've always had, in the past, our city managers had to move into the city.
And that's been, in my career, that's been an expectation as well. So this is, we're kind of in a new territory with,
Yes.
with a new market, and young people who are, you know, in double working families that they, you know, may live 10 miles away, and if you require them to live in the city, they may decline to apply for the job. Other comments?
Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'd be curious, given your experience, if maybe you could talk us through some of the pros or cons But I guess as somebody who has school-age children, you know, the idea of having to uproot your children from their schools in order to take a job, if our future city manager potentially has children, I think if they are in, you know, close enough proximity to get here, particularly in an emergency, I guess that would be my biggest concern, is if we were having some sort of crisis, like, are they going to be close enough to be able to get here to support whatever that need is? And I guess I would appreciate your thoughts around the pros and cons of loosening up or not loosening up that requirement.
No, I appreciate the question. And even though in the past I could argue of the benefit of having a city manager be a resident, because I've been through all that, and you're part of the community and you identify with the community and you run into people at the grocery store, and all that is true, although sometimes you don't like to run into people at the grocery store. But you know, because you have a lot of people who have school-age kids and again, may live within a 15-mile radius, but if you tell them that they have to move their kids into a new house, a new neighborhood, a new school district, they're going to say, well, I really don't have time to do that right now. And so you lose some people. At the same time, I think you can certainly express preference that you don't want someone who's so far away that that they can't be a part of the community events that you would like them to be a part of. You know, a city manager job is it's not really a job. It becomes a part of your life. It's almost like a marriage. Maybe I shouldn't use that analogy because it means different things to different people. But I mean, you're kind of marrying the council and you're marrying the city if you do it right. And so does that mean you have to be, you know, 3 blocks away, or could you be, you know, 15 minutes away? And I personally think the flexibility is more important than requiring them to be a resident.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I would support flexibility then.
Anyone else before I speak? So I was just looking at, we need to have somebody close by just because of emergencies and all the many things that, that we do in the city, but they don't have to be in the city, because you can be a mile outside of Mountlake Terrace and still be in Linwood, Briar, Shoreline, Kenmore. I'm looking at the time that it takes to get here, because, you know, 10, 15 minutes, that can mean a lot of different places. Because then they'll have a more variety of places to live. Because if you just, right now in Mountlake Terrace, you have pretty much 2 different types of housing to purchase and 1 or 2 types of places to rent. And there's probably none available.
Right. You bring up a really good point, because our former city manager had to live in an apartment for a year until there was certain housing available. And you're right, we're limited with the 4 square miles, and housing is expensive.
The Mayor, I appreciate your comment, and there had been a lot of talk again with the recruitment team about how to word this in the profile, because if we were to say, you know, a 15-minute driving time, that kind of limits it, you know, because of other factors in a way that people might think it's not workable. And then if we do it like a 15-mile radius, which gets you into North Seattle and covers a lot of ground, the danger in that is if someone wants to apply and they look and they do a map thing and they say, oh, I'm 17 miles from City Hall, then they would, you know, not apply when maybe you'd want them to apply. So I thought that using a terminology such as preferring residency in the community with fairly close proximity would kind of get the message across that you want them close. And so if they live in, you know, Longview, they're not going to try to do that.
No, but even if they lived in South Seattle, they wouldn't want to commute up to Mountlake Terrace because it's not 1 commute a day. It may be 2 or 3 commutes in one day.
Right.
And if there's an accident or the, you know, you would probably find the non-freeway routes, but it's just not, to me at least, is if I were to have to do that, it would not be feasible to live in Columbia City and commute to Mountlake Terrace. They are, but as city manager, you know, you're here in the morning for meetings, and then you're doing something else, and sometimes you're back here in the late afternoon, and then sometimes you're again back here again for an evening, something. And,
Well, I appreciate the comment, and again, my choice of these words was intended to convey that message to a prospective candidate to be close. I mean, that's not to say we could put a mileage thing in there, and, you know, I thought, well, maybe 15 miles would give you a pretty big circle, and you know, there's no reason why we couldn't do that if that's your preference. I was hesitant to put a time frame because, you know, depending on the time of the day, that varies so much. Would all of you feel better having a mileage number as opposed to just close proximity?
because 15 miles will get you to Columbia City, South Seattle.
Okay, so that's too big of a number. Okay.
Am I correct on that one? And then it gets you up to North Everett. So it's basically, if it's a reverse commute, you know, 15 miles to Everett is a shorter trip than 15 miles down to Seattle.
True. Okay, so the mileage is kind of an arbitrary number that loses its relevance. So again, is the council prefers residency in the community or in fairly close proximity? Does that capture it you know, and then once you're negotiating, if somebody is coming from out of state, they may, you know, maybe they will move into Mountlake Terrace. I mean, those are decisions that can be made, but to get the application in, you know, you don't want to turn people off by requiring something that they just can't do.
Well, if they're moving from out of state, they have to move anyways. And
Right.
they'll probably find a place that's fairly close to work.
Right.
But if you lived in Burien or Arlington, and then you know, that's close by in a way, but still it's a long trip if you have to do it more than
Okay.
once or twice a day.
Okay, no, I get a sense as to what's important to the council to have a person close by, and at this point, I just want to make sure we can have a language that's acceptable. So instead of coming up with an arbitrary number of miles or minutes, the language I read is that, does anybody object to the language, you know, using the term close proximity, fairly close proximity, and living in the community? Community with a small c means obviously, you know, you can live in the community and be in shoreline, I suppose. So I'm not sensing any objection, so I will talk to Councilmember Ryan, who's not here, and I will rest my case. So this would conclude my briefing, and thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next is a presentation and discussion of the composting materials plan ordinance. Who is giving that?
Mayor,
Oh, what?
sorry. Can
Did
we
I miss
actually switch agenda items and move up
Yeah, we have a guest here.
professional service agreement for prosecuting attorney? Move that up next, since we have guests for that in the
Oh,
audience.
okay. All right, so we're going to go to the review of the professional services agreement for the city prosecuting attorney with our chief and our assistant city manager.
Thank you for doing that. This is Stephen Clifton, Assistant City Manager, for the record. We do have guests here this evening, and we just wanted to sit through 2 more presentations. So this next item is a review and approval of the consultant services agreement with Zacher, Stock, and Krebs. So in early September, we found it necessary to begin searching to find an individual or a firm to serve in an interim capacity for uniform prosecution of criminal charges and civil infractions. So using my, as acting city manager at the time, I signed an interim contract with I will just call him Zacher for the rest of the presentation. and within the $40,000 authorization level. And then also we brought that back to the city council as an amendment number 1. In the meantime, what I also did on October 24th is we issued a request for proposal, requesting proposals from well-qualified law firms and/or attorneys interested in providing prosecuting services for the city. And we received one response, and that was from Zacher, Stock, and Krebs. And we have a proposal before you and a contract for consideration because they were selected and they have been providing city prosecuting legal services in the past. They've done a great job. Our city attorney and our police department are very happy with their services. And so you'll find attached a consulting services agreement between the city and Zacher, and to reduce the need to issue a RFP on an annual basis, the term of the agreement shall commence upon execution and termination starting in 2023. And I should note that the City Council has the ability to approve this on the consent agenda on December 19th if you choose to place it on there and then approve it at that time. But I'll turn the mic over to Pete Kaw, Police Chief. He'd like to introduce 2 individuals from the firm tonight.
I've known these folks in this firm for over 20 years, so I'd just like to acknowledge their presence and also thank them for hitting the ground running when we needed them with a phone call when the tragedy occurred and our past prosecutor passed away. The next day, they were doing the job for us before we really negotiated how to pay them. So thank you for that. But Jim Zacher, who I have called Jimmy for years, and Yolanda Stock are here.
Good evening. Does the council have any questions?
Councilmember
We have
Woodard.
I feel like we should because you've been sitting here so long. I just want to say thank you for taking on that responsibility without even knowing if we would pay you. I know you know we would pay you, but still, that's very important to kind of acknowledge that, and just thank you for taking the time to come up today.
Anyone else? I just want to say that we also, apparently, he is also another Mountlake Terrace graduate.
That's correct. I was raised up off 220th, right up the street from the Aztec. I went to Mountlake Terrace High School and Mountlake Terrace Elementary, as well as, I guess, Briar Terrace is Briar, but I spent the better part of my childhood running up and down 220th. So it's glad to be serving the city that I so wonderfully remember. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to move to the presentation and discussion of the composting materials plan ordinance. Good night.
Well, good evening, Mayor Matsumoto Wright, Mayor Pro Tem Wall and council members. For the record, Interim Public Works Director Phil Williams, joined by Laura Reed, our very excellent Stormwater Program Manager. We have 3 items to present, sort of in succession. This first one you may have heard about, and you may not. It didn't get a lot of fanfare at the time, but I think it was the 8th of March this year, the legislature passed in gross second substitute House Bill 1799. There was a companion bill in the Senate and compromises were reached, and what they passed was a bill that the focus of which is to stimulate the completion of that recycling symbol that you see for yard and garden waste and food waste. So we provide these collection services in town. We send them to a facility to turn it into compost, which they do. And this is focused on making sure there's a market for those materials. So what it does is it requires cities that meet one of 2 standards. Either their population is over 25,000, which we're not quite there, but we would be very soon anyway, or cities that are providing collection of organic materials to pass an ordinance before the end of 2022 which we'll hopefully hold a hearing on Monday and allow you to make a decision at that time. So we sort of quickly, this was missed, I think, for a few months when we were busy doing other things. It does have to be done by the end of the year, and it is required. But that said, I also think it's a very good thing to try to close that loop on managing organics. And what we're required to do then is develop a plan this coming year and search for projects that we can use composted or compost on. They'd be things like landscaping projects or bioswales or rain gardens or filtering of stormwater in some other way, amending soils of any type to make them increase their tilth and their ability to grow high-quality plants and so forth. It's a wonderful thing. It keeps them out of the landfill. That's the real focus here, because a lot of this just does get thrown away, and especially food scraps. And so we need to pass the ordinance. We need to put together a plan to use the materials. We also need to reach out and do some educational things. This is sort of assigned by by the law to public works departments, and that's what the ordinance that's attached in your package tonight would do as well. And so, and the third piece of that is we have to report. So when we get to 2024, we'll be reporting on the previous 12 months of success in using compost in our business practices. That's really what this accomplishes. I don't think it's particularly complicated. We've actually used a template from the city of Mercer Island, who had adopted one very recently. And I think several other people have kind of knocked off their ordinance because it's done pretty well. It's been through legal review, and I would commend it to you as a good effort to comply with this law, and be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? My Councilmember Selmore?
Because the first thing I think of, ranches, you know, our neighbors tried to do it, and they had to put the worms in it, and I just wondering, when you collect the food scraps, could that be in a certain area, and would you wait until it's at a certain level before you use it? I'm just thinking if you spread it in flows or something, and, I'm sorry, I just want to.
No, that's a really good question. And I think that was a growth curve that the whole state was on when they first began to add food scraps into this composting stream that had already been. It was all yard and garden waste prior to that. And now food scraps are part of it. They've done a lot of pilot studies on it, and now they're in full-scale commercial operation with mixed food scraps, and not just residential sources like your own dinner scraps and so forth, but with restaurants and, food processors and all of that. And it'll end up at these compost sites. It's quite a lot richer in organic material than the yard and garden waste is, so it gets mixed together, processed, shredded, put into windrows, and composted right along with the yard waste, and it breaks down wonderfully well. There are some things that don't do as well, if it's meat scraps and other things, but that's not really my area of expertise, although I did build one of these facilities once. It's been a long time now, but I think food waste have been incorporated into this pretty well in the last few years. So, and we've been collecting this from our residents already. This isn't about the collection side. It's about not even about the processing side, because somebody else is going to do that. It's about buying back the finished product. And so this does allow us, if we were to feel that the quality of the compost didn't meet our needs, or maybe it was on the verge of not being in compliance with some standard that we think it should be, we could use that as a reason maybe not to buy that particular product. It just puts an onus on us to plan to use these materials where we can, identify capital projects that we can use it on, in our park system, probably a lot of places when we put our mind to it. It has very few specifics on what the outcome has to be. It's just a requirement to pay attention to this issue, adopt the ordinance, and do the planning and the reporting. Laura, did you want to add anything on that?
We have a question here.
Just
Councilmember
maybe a
Carter.
clarification from Councilmember Sonmore's question. The city itself isn't collecting the food. It's because we offer the service through waste management.
Correct.
They collect it, they process it, it becomes compost, then our job is to turn around and buy it and use it in our projects because of this new state requirement.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Although we are also a customer of Waste Management's, and, you know, we can provide those materials. All this storm debris we're going to be picking up over the weekend out in our event will, you know, be delivered to Waste Management for processing as well.
Okay,
I think you covered it very well. I don't think there's anything else I can add. It's fine.
All right, well, we would place this then on your upcoming meeting on next week on the 19th and hold a public hearing. I'm sure it'll be a popular ticket, and then you can make a decision one way or the other.
all right. I don't see any other questions, hands, or whatever, but yeah, we've been doing food waste. We put everything in that yard waste thing.
Yeah, and we pick it up every 2 weeks. In the summertime, I would
the summertime, it
acknowledge
does
that
get
if you
rancid.
keep the lid shut, you're probably fine. Okay.
All right. Are we on to the next one, which is still going to be, you guys? Okay, so the next one is a presentation and discussion of the Snohomish Conservation District ILA.
Oh, yes. As you may remember, in past years, we've had an existing interlocal agreement with the Snohomish Conservation District. They do a variety of different services for cities and within the county, but they are particularly good at environmental education. This past year, they helped us to put on a very successful summer event for kids to teach them environmental science in Ballinger Park, and Councilman Woodard was there. Good time was had by all, and I think that everybody learned things, including the parents. We have met with the Snohomish Conservation District to talk about the 2023 scope. I would like to have them continue to do some of their stormwater-focused youth activities, which meets the council's goal of sustainability, environmental stewardship, and also helps us to fulfill our obligations under the ecology stormwater permit for the city. In addition to the redoing the outdoor environmental event for kids and stormwater-focused curriculum, I would also like their help in doing a kickoff event for the Trees for Terrace planting in the fall. I think they do a great job, and I think it's a great way to educate parents through, exposing their kids to some new ideas. So this is a very small scope of work at $6,800. The only reason I bring it before you at all, actually, is because it's an amendment to an ILA, and so that's legally required. But I would ask that you consider approving the scope of work and allowing the city manager to sign our new ILA amendment for 2023. And this could be done as part of the consent agreement, consent calendar.
Do we have any questions or comments? I think this is a no-brainer.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next is the review and renewals of the on-call specialized engineering services.
Very good. I'll start off, and depending on your questions, we'll both probably participate, but you have, for a size that the city is, Mountlake Terrace, a pretty robust capital program, both in the utilities as well as general governmental. I mean, think Main Street Phase 1, Main Street Phase 2, and so forth. Those are large capital projects for a town of your size to take on. And so I think it's kind of an outsized program based on our size. And right now, our engineers are pretty handicapped with a lot of empty positions, and it's been that way for a while. One of the responses to that was to sign a series of engineering services contracts that were on-call contracts with in some cases, a fairly large spending cap, but then work orders would be done each time we need help on something. And those are regulated by underlying purchasing policies, and one of which is was previously a $40,000 cap that the city manager could sign on his or her authority. That's now been raised by your action to $75,000. But nonetheless, you can't just spend all of the money that's approved in these on-call contracts without any individual one over $75,000 being brought to the council for approval. So I just wanted to point that out. There's a number of them. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 actually. 6 of them are on-call contracts. 1 of them is not. We can go over them individually if you'd like. I might just mention the companies. First, Consor, which probably doesn't ring a bell yet with you, but Murray Smith probably does. And there's been a name change there. They're currently helping us on the West Side Water Main project, which is another large project. There's Associated Earth Sciences. That one's much smaller. They do geotechnical engineering based on work orders that we might give them. It's hard to say how much of those services we'll need in the next year, but the cap on that's $100,000. It's not a great deal. We've got David Evans and Associates who provide survey and some CAD support for us. It's also $100,000. Murray Smith was $2 million, by the way, Consor. Krazan is another small one at about $100,000. They do material testing for us. We've got Osborne Consulting, which Laura uses primarily in the stormwater business, and that's a $750,000 cap. OTAC is the one that isn't an on-call contract. We're not paying for that, but OTAC is the city's consultant to deal with the Sound Transit project. So we have mainly one person, Oxford Consulting, Chad Oxford, who is doing a lot of the coordination and inspection with Sound Transit on behalf of the city. And the city staff also charges a little bit of time for the same reason to that contract. And then the last one is with RH2. That is an on-call. Michelle Wright, if you've met her, she's up on the second floor. She's in here about 3 days a week, and she helps us with plan review and engineering for private development, and as well as CIP plan review, and then also is working with Christie and CED on rewriting the city's development code, or certain sections of the development code. So that's what all that work is, and we're not asking for any additional spending authority. We're merely extending the expiration date of these contracts to the end of 2023. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Will we be able to hire who we need in the next year?
Well, I sure hope so. We've got irons in the fire we've got 3 engineering positions that are vacant, 2 civil engineer 2s and 1 civil engineer 1. We've, of course, got the public works director position. We've got the capital projects manager position. We just filled the city engineer's position, which was great. Rich Meredith really hitting the ground running, and it's good to have him. But we're still a little shorthanded what is needed, so we'll be making use of these contracts for the next couple of years.
If I might say something, as somebody who works in the engineering department, as a small city, I don't think it really makes sense for us to have a geotechnical specialist or a surveyor or, somebody who, knows how to analyze water quality treatment facilities. But that's where it's great to have the on-call, because you can bring those people in for just the amount that you need of that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps on that note, that's where my question goes. So we get to end of 2023. Best case scenario, how many of those 7 are still with us, or 6? OTAC's not with us.
At the end of 2023?
Yeah.
I would guess they'd all be there. You don't need to use them. Now, if you have more internal resources that can do certain things, then you're going to be writing fewer work orders to these on-call contracts. I think OTAC will definitely be there because the Sound Transit project won't reach substantial completion until sometime probably in the third quarter of 24.
Sure.
So we'll be working with them all the way through then.
Yeah, maybe I should revise my question. I don't want you to go through the whole thing and then I ask you. Well, I'll repeat all that again. Really, I'm asking, you just noted how many open vacancies we have.
Oh, vacancies.
And so to me, I think, well, if we have those filled, do these contracts become less of a need, or are they still there based upon what you just kind of pointed out? You wouldn't want this
right
geotech person for full time. We're not hiring a geotech, but nonetheless, I didn't know, are those, does someone that we hire that's currently vacant decrease the need or eliminate the need for anybody on that
I
paper?
don't think it eliminates it. I do think it would decrease it.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Also, I think once we're fully staffed with another contract specialist, we could take these contracts out to bid again. And I think that is about the right time for us to do that. We shouldn't keep them around forever. We should, make it a public process.
Yep.
I wanted to give Mayor Pro Tem a chance, but I don't see a hand going up. Okay, anyone else? All right. Are you next too? Or is this your final one?
I'm
Yes.
sorry. Oh, one thing I was going to mention on this, there is 7 of them. I don't necessarily see the need to do them individually. If there's, we will put them all as a package, I hope, on your consent agenda for next week. Not have to take separate votes on them unless there's one or more of them that you'd like to do that on.
So I thought it was going to be on a consent agenda.
The bill is written just for everyone.
Yeah. I didn't know what Jennifer might want to say about that, but I'll talk to her later. I think that's okay.
Okay.
I was just going to ask Jennifer, just a quick, is it item number E for Monday, approval of the renewal of on-call specialized engineering?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's on there, she put it on.
Yeah.
All together.
Okay.
It's only on there once, which means they're all listed in there.
Yes.
I'm happy with that. I've been given different answers on that in the past sometimes, but.
Okay. Anyone else? If not,
I would just like to say as a personal note, I'm sorry to see you go, Councilmember McCardle. It's been great working with you for 5 years, and we'll miss your input on the council. Yeah.
We got one more meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I may not be there at that one.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next is the review of the professional services agreement for the public defender. The public, no, it was prosecuting attorney, but are they also our public defender? That's
Yeah, this is a
separate.
separate one.
This is separate, yeah.
Good evening,
both
council
attorneys.
members. For the record, Stephen Clifton, Assistant City Manager. Included in your packet is a new one-year contract which meets the city's legal obligation to provide public defender services for those who are unable to afford an attorney on their own. As outlined in the memorandum that's also included in your packet, Feldman and Lee is asking the city for compensation in the amount of $18,000 per month That is for 375 weighted cases annually, which equates to about 1.25 full-time equivalent lawyers. This is a 25.5% higher than current contracted amount of $13,905. I did include a memo in your packet. It's dated December 9th from Feldman and Lee, which outlines explanations as to why the rate is going up. And that is more than what we budgeted. We weren't prepared for that amount, but I did talk with Pete, I did talk with Joey in the police department, and they do expect that we'll have under expenditures in the municipal court budget, which will cover the anticipated overage above the amount we budgeted. So we think we're good there. If for any reason it does go a little bit above that, then they can come back for a budget amendment in 2023. So with that, city administration recommends the council authorize the interim city manager to sign the new contract with Feldman and Lee for public defender services. And that can be accomplished by placing the agreement on and approving the December 19th consent agenda. I should note, however, whereas we just issued a request for proposal for prosecuting attorney services, we did not do it for Feldman and Lee. I did notify Feldman and Lee that we do plan to issue a request for proposal for 2023. And the reason we do that, every few years, it's really good practice just to go out and issue a request for proposal to make sure that the dollars you're spending of the public's is going towards the person or firm who can best provide the service. So they are aware that we'll be going out for RFP, is what it's known as, next year.
All right. Do we have any comments? Councilmember Woodard?
Just so we know, he asked a question. We've been satisfied with the work they've been doing?
Very.
All right.
Yes, I spoke with Pete and with Hillary, and they're very satisfied with the service.
Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Stefan. I guess it's here in our letter, and I want to make sure that folks who are not reading that letter understand kind of that cost increase. So just to make sure that I understand it correctly, so prior to 2022, they had not had an increase in compensation since 2014. And so it increased only 3% from $13,500 per month to $13,905 in 2022. But that's a rate, I mean, that $13,500 was their rate in 2014. And so the big jump this year is reflective of the fact that that number has been very flat for a number of years, correct?
Yes, and it's also dependent on the number of cases, the 375. And so that really depends on how many people need us to pay for an attorney to, you know, where they can't afford it. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We go on to the next one, which is the review of the professional services agreement with the Johnston Group.
Okay, thank you. On November 3rd, Jake Johnson attended the City Council meeting to provide a legislative update, and during that meeting, there was a proposed draft scope of services that was provided and discussed, and it was noted that that scope of services would serve as an exhibit to a future professional services agreement. And so that was provided to you on November 3rd, and it is actually attached to the draft professional services agreement that's before you for consideration. In the memorandum and highlighted in also the bill, which will come before you on the 19th, it does highlight the scope of work that Jake provides. And we really enjoy working for Jake, and I believe you do as well. And he provides a great service, and I think that's evidenced by the amount of grants that the city has received from the federal government. We've been highly successful, particularly for a city of 22,000 people. So outlined in the attached memo, the Johnston Group is asking the city for compensation in the amount of $4,725 per month, which is unchanged from the 2022 agreement. So city administration does recommend the city council authorize the interim city manager to sign the professional services agreement between the city and the Johnston Group, and that can be done by placing this item on and approving the December 19th, 2022 consent agenda.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments before we move on? Okay.
Okay.
Next is the review of professional services agreement with Gordon Thomas Honeywell Governmental Affairs.
Okay. This is the last one for me this evening, and I should note that this also ties to the November 3rd City Council meeting. That's where Shelley Helder with Gordon Thomas Honeywell also attended that meeting to present to you a legislative update. And during the meeting, we did provide the council with a draft version of the city's 2023-2024 state legislative agenda. That was shared with the council, and that was developed based on input from the council legislative steering committee. That does serve in part as Exhibit A to the attached professional services agreement for year 2023, and highlights of the scope of work can be found in the December 15th memorandum that's included in the council packet. As outlined in the memorandum, Gordon Thomas Honeywell is asking the city for compensation in the amount of $4,800 per month, plus expenses not to exceed $2,000 for the entire year. And that's unchanged from year 2022. And the reason for that, in part, is because the council has asked Gordon Thomas Honeywell to focus a lot of their energy on trying to obtain funding for capital projects. And so they're able then to adjust the contract and keep the dollar amount the same for next year. City administration recommends the city council authorize the interim city manager to sign the attached professional services agreement. And this can occur by placing it on and approving the December 19th consent agenda. And that's all I have. If the council has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions? Nope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And so next is public comments. Do we have any public comments?
No one signed up for public comments, and there's no one in the online audience.
All right. Next is the review of the December 19th, 2022 meeting agenda. Has everyone looked at it? I looked at it earlier today. We had all our presentations tonight. Okay, so next is council comments. Does anyone have any council comments? Councilmember Woodard?
I'll try to keep them short. The first one, I wanted to double back to the city manager's report, and it came up here in the composting conversation, which is just to say thank you for the storm debris removal. That's huge, and so I just kind of wanted to make sure that we paused and acknowledged that, but also to kind of flip it a little bit and just recognize that a lot of small businesses or folks who are in the business of removing debris, I hope that they're not, I'll use the word hurt in this process. I paid quite a bit of money to have the debris moved from my place, but I thankfully have a budget for that. And so recognizing that's not something anyone could have prepared for, I just wanted to acknowledge that. That's great for our residents to have that process and resource, but also acknowledge that I hope we're not taking food off of someone else's table in that process. And that's just a give take, and just wanted to acknowledge that, I think we're striking a nice balance. One day in and out and do it. But again, just wanted to acknowledge, I appreciate the city for doing that. And then the other two quick comments that I have are just to give you all a heads up, as well, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Ryan, when he probably watches the video. The DEIC met, my week has been really long, so I think that was yesterday. But they did take our challenge to heart and looked at the trespassing ordinance, and they had a lot to say. So I'll just leave that there to let you know, one, that they did in fact look at it. They had to set a timeline to proceed, so they won't be coming to us Monday, for example, but nonetheless, they are looking at it and giving it some serious thought. Stefan was there as well, so we sat quietly and just listened to what they had to say. And then the second piece of that, as just a heads up as well, something that they're working on and that they'll come, I think, around the same time to share with us, which is that they're going to ask us to consider doing a land acknowledgement as a formal part of our process. I had nothing to take away here other than just to be aware that our DEIC is thinking about the charge that we've given them, and then also coming with their own requests downstream at some point, and I'll go deeper into that on Monday. Yes. Recognizing that we're on stolen lands, and so a lot of organizations have been doing that, but they want to do more than just say, hey, have a land acknowledgement. They want to actually have rationale behind that, and so I'll leave that to them to further explain, but I'm sure you've had to have been somewhere where they've done that at a conference or a public talk. Even they do it now when we're on the internet and acknowledge wherever they're sitting, ancestral lands of the indigenous populations. And again, they'll come with their own, but it's as a heads up that that's something that's on their minds.
Did they want to do that before the Pledge of Allegiance every time, or?
That part, I think they will leave that up to us if we're even interested in doing it.
We'll
I think they
find
just
out.
want to make sure. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Because I've had long land acknowledgements and the short ones too.
Mhm. Yeah, and for what that's worth, at least if, I don't think I'm speaking on behalf of the Tulalip tribe, but I've been in different settings with them where they really have brought the problematics of how people are doing it, that it's just a performance. So I will at least say that the DEIC definitely wants to double back and make sure that it isn't just a performance. And we can say, look, it's here, but we actually would acknowledge why we want to do that. But again, that's for them to bring forward. But just as a heads up, that's something that's coming our way, or that they'll be requesting of us at some point.
All right. I don't see any other hands going up. I did want to double back on the tree removal. I got a question from a person in the public asking if we had a list of cheap tree removal services that we could give to the citizens so that they can clear out their debris. So I asked that question to the city, and the answer was, we're going to have them come in and, bring their stuff to the city. I just thought that was really great because, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Stefan and Phil and everybody else. I think Jesse was one of the top people. That's a great response for just a question that I had that I was just expecting an answer, yes or no. So I want the public to realize that this is over and above what we have done it in the past, but it's not something we do all the time. Councilmember Salmore.
The way the contract you recently approved with Waste Management is written, we will get the first 2 dumpsters of yard waste spotted at their expense. After that, I think these are 30-yard boxes, we'll pay $200 a piece, if there are any more after that, plus $5 a day rental, plus you pay the tipping fee that they have to pay at the composting site. I don't know yet what that will be because we don't know what kind of response we'll get this weekend. But yeah, anything after those first 2 would be at the city's expense. We would be paying for that out of our street fund. We will have 3 people there on Saturday and Sunday. That will be on overtime. I mean, it's not a massive amount of money, but we need to monitor it. You don't know what people would leave there if it isn't monitored. So, Yeah. Bet. We'll chip it on site too, shred it. So it's easier to haul, except for if people bring in big dimensional stuff, set that aside and handle that separately.
So There was one person on social media, we put it on social media, and everybody is thanking us, but one person had thought that we should, instead of doing something like this, we should bring back the all-city, and again, that is completely separate. This is a thank you to the city for doing something nice. But I guess there are always somebody out there that's going to want to say something else. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick follow-up. I think one of the reasons this is extra nice right at this moment is because our local waste station is not accepting green waste, right? So we can't, normally you can take yard waste up to the dump here at Mountlake Terrace, and you can't right now. So I think it's a particularly good opportunity for our residents if they have items like that they know that they can't just, haul it there, that this really is a good opportunity for them to not have to go significant ways in order to navigate getting rid of those,
You can
that debris.
take it there,
Oh, you,
but you won't get the favorable rate of processing it as yard and garden debris and food.
oh, and then it goes in the
It
garbage.
goes-
Right, I mean, they could
Okay.
take it as garbage, but that costs quite a bit of money, so.
Well, and then it goes in the garbage, which is also not great. So, okay. So it's extra great, and I would agree. It's very nice, and we appreciate it very much.
Okay, so I don't see any other hands going up, and so the next on our agenda is adjournment. We are adjourned.
Good night, all. Have a good week.
Good night.